The amount of time you need to reach a basic fluency level in a foreign language, usually considered to be B2 level, varies drastically and, of course, depends on a number of factors, including individual learning capabilities. However, we can still get a general idea of it by looking at some high-intensity language learning programs. For example, at Defense Language Learning Institute, they would require around 1100 hours and in some cases even more in total of classroom-based learning to complete. In a standard graduate university setting, second language acquisition programs are usually taught over the span of 3 or more years. A disclaimer: we are talking about learning a foreign language as an adult or, in some cases, as a teenager. We will return to some high-intensity language programs later, but for now I just want to make a point that reaching a good level of foreign language requires careful planning and commitment. Therefore, making an incorrect choice of a language to learn a costly mistake. This is why I like to give you a list of points that are worth thinking about when you are picking a language to learn. Sometimes you will have to learn a particular language. Sometimes you just can't choose. And I will attend to that situation as well in the end of the video, providing you with some useful tips on how to learn this language more effectively and how to improve and sustain your level of motivation. Speaking of motivation, this is the first thing to consider when choosing a language. Let us at first try to understand how to even classify motivation, because it's quite an abstract notion. There are two main models of motivation. According to the first one, called instrumental integrative model, there are two types of motivation. The first one is instrumental motivation, which is language learning for immediate or practical goals. The second one is integrative motivation, which is language learning for personal growth and cultural enrichment. It was in the end not possible to determine which type of motivation was connected with better success in learning, so basically both are quite important. But there is also a newer concept that approaches our motivation as a dynamic thing that is prone to changing. Learning about this model will be very helpful for us in order to understand how to manage our motivation in the end. This newer model is called process-oriented model of motivation, and according to it, there are 3 phases of motivation. There is choice motivation, which refers to getting started and setting our initial goals in learning the language. There is an executive motivation, which refers to carrying out the necessary tasks to maintain motivation. And there is also motivation retrospection, which refers to appraisal of and reaction to your performance. Here's a good example of how this might work. A secondary school learner in Poland is excited about an upcoming trip to Spain and decides to take a Spanish course, choice motivation. After a few months of grammar lessons, he becomes frustrated with the course, spots going to classes, executive motivation, and finally decides to drop the course. A week later, a friend tells him about a great Spanish conversation course she's taking, and his choice motivation is activated again. He decides to register in the conversation course, and in just a few weeks he develops some basic Spanish conversational skills and a feeling of accomplishment. His satisfaction level is so positive, motivation retrospection, that he decides to enroll in a more advanced Spanish course when he returns from his trip to Spain. As you see, this type of motivation teaches us to think of our motivation as of a dynamic essence. So instead of concentrating on your choice of motivation, you should think about your abilities to manage other types of motivation in future as you progress in your learning of a chosen language. Of course, there can be additional circumstances that would be either difficult to predict or difficult to manage, such as the effectiveness of the teacher or the quality of material you use for your study. My advice is to still do reasonably detailed research in an attempt to predict whether you would be able to manage these factors to your advantage. There is one more thing that will affect your motivation: the degree to which you enjoy the language and the culture behind it. Do you enjoy the structure, grammar peculiarities, writing system of the language? Do you enjoy the way it sounds? It may appear negligible at first, but it will grow in importance as you progress in your learning, spending hundreds of hours on it. To sum up the motivation aspect. When choosing a language to learn, use the instrumental integrative model of motivation. Thus, to achieve better results, you should have both practical goals for learning a language, understanding how it will help you with certain goals and challenges, and more general goals connected with your desire to develop personal skills, widen your perspective, and enrich your knowledge about the world. The process-oriented model of motivation will help you think about the future challenges. Ask yourself if when learning a particular language you will be able to sustain your level of motivation in the long run with internal and external sources of motivation and encouragement. Opportunities to practice the language, to find qualitative instruction and to receive constant feedback are going to be crucial for sustaining motivation in order to continue learning a language. Additionally, do not neglect the simple notion of whether you enjoy speaking the language and using it for other communicative purposes. The second thing to seriously consider when choosing a foreign language to learn is this language's applicability. Here, by applicability, we understand the demand for using a particular language in a number of different situations and areas of your life. Applicability of a certain language can be either general or individual. The general applicability of a language indicates its general demand in the whole sum of instances where it can or should be used. To speak more simply, it is how popular is the given language. To determine it, we can talk about the number of speakers. For our purposes, I would suggest using the total number of speakers and not just the number of native speakers. Compare the two following tables. Just by looking at the position of the English language in the first table that provides us the number of native speakers, it becomes clear that this approach presents a very limited and skewed data for making a decision. Spanish and Mandarin are put before English in popularity, although it is obvious that English can be used much more frequently all over the world in general. The second table. It indicates the number of all speakers of the target language and gives us a much more adequate picture of how popular is the language. English is the first here, Mandarin is the second, and Hindi, not Spanish, is the third in this hierarchy. Again, these numbers provide you with a very generalized view, but they are able to give you some understanding of the language's spread and usability. Another way of determining the language's general applicability would be learning which languages have high-ranking official statuses in the most powerful world organizations or areas of activities, which can, again, to some degree, indicate this language's relevancy and if it is in demand in the areas you are interested in. For example, there are 6 official languages used by the UN. These are Arabic, Chinese Mandarin, English, French, Russian, and Spanish. We may assume that if you need a language well connected and used in the world of global politics and economy, you can definitely pick one of these 6 languages. We should also look at our specific areas of personal and professional interest to see if learning a specific language will give us some form of advantage there. Here's a very illustrative example. Currently, the universal language of science is indisputably English, with more than 85% and sometimes even 95% of scientific publications written in English. Therefore, even though Chinese Mandarin is not too far behind English in total number of speakers, and even is significantly ahead of it, judging by the number of native speakers, its applicability in the scientific world cannot even closely compare to the one of English language. However, you can have your individual set of circumstances that would influence the language's applicability for you individually. If you live on the border with China, for example, planning to study the history of the Qing dynasty at the Beijing University, and most of your friends and family are already living in China, well, you might look at the situation very differently. Thus, we talk about the applicability of language as seen from your individual or personal perspective. Consider the following questions. Which languages are spoken in the country of your residency? Which languages are spoken in the neighboring countries? Which languages are spoken by the members of your family or your close friends? Which languages are primarily used in your area of professional, cultural, or personal interests? Giving yourself time for diligent exploration of these questions will help you ensure that you pick a language which would be useful for you in the most amount of possible life scenarios. The third point we're going to talk about here is the language's difficulty. The relative difficulty of a language can be a good way to calculate the effort it would take you to reach the desired level of fluency within a certain time frame. To do that, you should take into account the following parameters that are going to be different for everyone. First, the language family of your native language and of the target language you'd like to learn. It is easier to learn a new language that is related to one which is either your native or the one you already are fluent in. The second one is your pattern recognition skills. If this is your weak spot, you will be struggling more with languages with complex grammar structure. Your memory skills is the third thing to take into account. Similar approach can be used here. The languages that require a lot of memorization of either writing symbols, such as Chinese Mandarin, or grammar categories, even at the basic level, would be quite difficult for you if your visual memory is not your strong side. At the same time, your audio memory will be crucial to mastering speaking tonal languages such as, again, Chinese Mandarin. To find a place to start with the research to determine whether a particular language is going to be more or less difficult for you, especially if you are an English language speaker, you can check the language difficulty ranking by the DLIFLC language Institute. As we see, the Institute has 13 language-intensive courses with languages and language dialects sorted into 3 or 4 categories according to their difficulty. French, Spanish and Indonesian languages are the easiest to master for English speakers. Indonesian here is category 2 since it's rather different from languages of Romanic or Germanic group, but still very manageable. Russian falls into the 3rd category with 50% longer period of study. Cyrillic alphabet and its complex synthetic nature makes it quite hard for those who were not exposed to Russian language or to other Slavic languages before. Arabic and Chinese alphabet languages, which utilize a completely different logics and writing systems, are even harder and demand almost twice time to master compared to the languages from the first 2 categories. There are other similar and more detailed classifications as well. You can learn more about them if you check out my article. The link is going to be in the description to the video. Again, such classification will not provide you with exact number of classroom instruction hours you need to master a new language. This is all going to be very individual. However, these difficulty rankings can still be a great illustration that allows you to compare some of the languages you are thinking of studying. The 4th point to take into account when thinking about choosing a foreign language to study is culture. You won't be able to make any significant progress in learning a foreign language and achieve fluency in it unless you understand the culture behind the language you're aiming to learn. The study of culture behind the target language allows students to develop communicative competence for use in situations the learners might expect to encounter, to understand and to use implicating and indirect language such as humor, irony, cultural references, and others, to improve knowledge of the etymology of a language, have significantly higher motivation to learn and practice the language, widen opportunities to use the language, develop awareness of the target languages, and so on. A lot of reasons to study culture. Now that you understand the importance of it, you have to see if it appeals to you, and if you're interested in learning the history of the language and the culture of the people who speak it. Your strong appeal or dislike towards a certain culture should be one of the most important factors that influence your decision to either learn or not learn a particular foreign language. Sometimes there can be a practical necessity to communicate in a certain language. For such cases, the following advice will help you to be more precise and effective with your learning process. Back to talking about culture. Start with extensive research of the target language's history and the culture behind it. The second advice is spend your free time immersed in the activities encouraging you to study and use the language, be it social activities such as joining a study group or visiting lectures, or personal such as reading books or listening to podcasts in the target language. These activities should be meaningful for you so they don't feel like part of a learning routine, but something that you would do in your native language nevertheless. And the third advice, be or become an avid networker. Socializing in a target language will provide you with more practice to polish your communication skills, and it also just feels good to see that people can understand you and that you are achieving some results. In conclusion, there should always be a practical necessity or reason behind learning a language, which is why when we speak about choosing a language to learn, your motivation should be the first factor for consideration. Then assess the applicability of languages you are choosing from. Also take into account the target language's difficulty. Just keep in mind it will vary depend on your background. Do not forget about the utter importance of learning about history and culture that stands behind the language. Even if you have to learn a specific language due to the set of circumstances you find yourself in, you can still drastically improve your chances of mastering it effectively by utilizing an effective approach to your study of the language and the culture behind it. Thanks again for your attention. If you feel this video was a bit too rushed up, it is because it was. It's just a brief retelling of my article on the same topic because it's a vast topic that, requires a lot of references to scientific literature and a lot of illustrations. So feel free to follow the link in the description to my website and to read the whole article with more details, illustrations and references. And of course, you might benefit from interaction and from asking questions, and you can do that just posting comments below this video. I will do my best to provide you with any additional information that you might benefit from. For now, goodbye.